Um, yeah, and then just like watching it, I remember just like lockdown, not being able to work actually, surprisingly. You know, I was looking forward to working from home, but actually really struggling to focus, and just sort of like lying on the sofa being like, what's going on? And like staring at news stories being like, well, how many deaths? Oh shit. And like, just being kind of part of the news cycle, but being quite passive in that. And like watching the deaths grow and grow, and then these awful daily briefings from whichever member of the Tory party has been wheeled out to speak in front of the press that day. This kind of like, and then, the next day there would be like another Tory party member like in the news being like, oh no, well you can only go out to, to exercise for half an hour and once a day. And I was like, that's nothing to do with the science. That is absolutely nothing to do with the science of the transmission of this virus. It's literally just to do with them, exerting a sort of power and control thing. And they were like, sort of Tory agenda going on. And I think that's just, and then just watching the death rate just slowly go up, and that horrendous like herd immunity thing at the beginning, which was kind of like, when they said herd immunity, I was kind of like, really, is that a thing? Like, maybe we are all going to get it and we will all become immune, it'll be fine. And then it was like, no. lots of people are going to die, and they're going to evade any responsibility. So I spent like quite a long time suddenly just like going into this kind of like quite deep kind of like anger at the government. Just like, I am so angry with these like entitled like politicians who are just being wheeled out to talk to the public. Everyone's just in varying levels of uncertainty about like what's actually going on, and you've just got, they're just giving too much information and nothing clear. And I was pretty good with the social distancing. I actually went into kind of like proper lockdown for, I think it was about 6 weeks, 3 to 6 weeks anyway, where I didn't come closer than two. Oh, actually, no, that's not entirely true. Like, I did follow what I would consider as the Netherlands briefing, which was basically find someone that you can partner with, because I live on my own and I'm single, so find a friend that you can partner with so you can actually have some kind of like physical contact in that time. So I did that, which was breaking the rules, but I assessed it and thought that was great, and it was actually much better for me on like an emotional and mental health level as well. So yeah. That's okay. Interesting. Yeah. I mean, it was just that sense of being isolated, actually, just being isolated and kind of glued to the newsreel, like on a phone, checking the Guardian for live updates. And I actually decided not to do that after a while, because I was finding myself being too glued to the phone. But it was like this kind of detachment, and I think, well, it was just like, there was like the fear that it was going to happen to your loved ones and like to my loved ones and me, like, and then there was this kind of, this like, oh, there's things going on and there's like red headlines everywhere. And that, I can't go closer than 2 meters to anyone. I mean, I spent like going outdoors was quite strange, because it was like going to the shops. It was just like the levels of stress were unbelievable. It was like, oh my god, I've come into like closer than 2 meters. I'm just, and there was at one point where I actually had to just let go of that and just think, do you know what? I'm not sure, because I'm not in a high risk category. you know, I could spend my time being really stressed out at other people and like outdoors. I'm being like, oh my god, they came a bit too close. Then actually, I was just like, oh god, I can't. You know, that stress was the worst thing, really. But yeah, the unreality was like, yeah, being sort of isolated and basically perceiving the world through, even more so through a screen, just was really, yeah, really difficult at that time. Well, and kind of really shone a light for me on like how, you know, we're so glued into like social media and the news reel, and then I actually, yeah, I had to cut myself off from it because it was causing me so much stress. Actually, it was, you know, and I actually just had to then engage much more with my immediate environment. So just like resort to the localism and like talking to people near me rather than like engage. I stopped using Facebook. I deactivated my account. Just like, yeah, couldn't deal with it. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I live on a boat, so I was part of a small, like, neighbourly mutual aid group who, yeah, so, and we would just kind of look out for each other, and then we had some socially distant choir singing, so we would sort of get together and sit in a circle and sing, which was really nice. There were other mutual aid groups that I knew of, but I didn't personally get involved with them. Partly because I was working full time, so I actually didn't have a lot of time to go out and do that. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, the social distancing choir was amazing. It was like, we very tentatively approached it as a project. This is a group of boaters, so a lot of us live in our own little isolated kind of, well, boats. We live on our own. And then we kind of made this decision to have a choir, and we all got together and sat at socially distanced in a circle. And it was amazing. Like, I don't think I've experienced such, like, the first time it's just such sort of camaraderie, really. Like, we just all got together and sort of belted out various different songs, not very well. And different people led us through different songs, which was great. And then we decided to meet every week. So we met every week after that, and it was just a really lovely thing. You know, it built a bit of community around where we were. Like, on the boats, we tend to move every 2 weeks, but obviously during the lockdown they stopped us moving. So it was actually quite nice. Like, normally we're a very transitory community, but we actually could stop and get to know each other and sing together. We had this, it was Beltane, so on the 1st of May, we had an amazing, like, quite sort of moving fire sort of ritual, actually. We lit a fire and then all sort of stood around it at social distance, and then kind of did a really sort of, strange and interesting, like, kind of ceremony where we burnt our past regrets and welcomed in things for the future and leapt over this fire, which was amazing. And we all did it basically in silence, and it was just like this level of community that we built together that was something quite different to the way that you engage with your neighbours normally. So yeah, it was really, really special, actually. It was really nice.
confess I didn't take it particularly seriously. So I carried on into work, and I got something that may or may not have been COVID it must have been mid-February, and having to isolate the symptoms. It ran through our house. I think all of us had symptoms, and the problem I have with it is that I don't currently know whether I've had it or not. I don't know, and that ignorance is a distress, because we simply don't know whether we've got the potential protection of antibodies or not. So I mean that's been a thread of concern for me. But having gone into lockdown a bit early, I think by the time I was due to come back to work, we'd gone out on full lockdown and everybody was sent home. The type of job I do means that I've worked from home solidly. I've not had the inconvenience of being furloughed or the risk, touch wood, to my job. There doesn't appear to be any concern with my job at the moment, but I've actually got busier, if anything else, as work. I've had to adjust, and I've been capable of adjusting to working from home. Indeed, it's probably changed how we operate forever now. So in terms of my experiences being locked indoors, having to utilise what we had, worrying for chiefly for our parents. So my dad, he has health concerns, and he's had similar health. He's had pneumonia a few years ago, so we've been absolutely petrified about him getting it, to the point that we have walked around on eggshells with him, and he's the type of person that can't bear that type of behaviour. So for him, he would prefer to just carry on as normal. So there's been that as well. In terms of other impacts, perhaps not necessarily on me, but on the kids. My eldest is affected in terms of his GCSEs. That's caused a particular level of grief, I have to say, because it seems that his mocks will be the way in which they judge his GCSE. I know there's more to it, but as is typical with kids, I don't think that I think they set the mocks in a way to try and scare them into behaving properly and revising properly for their exams, and I think that's probably backfired, because we're now worried about what type of grades you'll get, having previously been coming up with prospective grades that were very high. Now obviously we're looking at grades that are based around mocks that he clearly didn't apply himself to, so we have that particular consideration as well. That's not so much me, that's the others. But obviously, my wife's a teacher as well, so she's had different issues to worry about in terms of work, and she teaches at the same school as two of my daughters, so she has had to balance being a teacher with being a parent in those circumstances. She's had quite a unique perspective, seeing how her school operates from both directions in this crisis, and I have to say the schools have done pretty well, I think. Albeit it's affected the kids in different ways. One of my daughters has thrived in it. The other one has had to work really hard. She really liked the structure of school, and being able to sit at home, not have someone standing over her, it seems, has led her to get quite a long way behind in terms of her work. So it's thrown up things that if you'd asked me what I thought the problems would be at the beginning, they've not been what they've turned out to be. For example, in terms of money, I seem to be saving a fortune. I'm saving an absolute fortune in terms of money, in terms of travel and not having to eat lunch in central London, and kids not being able to spend money. It's financially, it's been quite positive, which just seems really odd, really curious. Sorry, Joe, you've got a question coming. my government, well, it's... Yeah, I do. I mean, the problem is you don't know how fair they are, because you know my politics. You know they come from they lean quite strongly to the left. So I'm naturally critical of any Tory government. But when they seem to, the arch concern for me is the funneling of people with known symptoms and confirmed what's the term I'm looking for? Well, confirmed presence of COVID in people, and then being funneled into to help the care for the elderly, the healthcare sector that's dealing with the elderly is just literally pushing a gun into that environment and expecting it not to go off if people are playing with it. It's that for me is an utter disgrace. And even if you look at this from a simply, if you look at it and you're not taking it seriously, and clearly the fact that he was prepared to dismiss matters, as far as we can tell, not turning up to meetings. So the first 5 Cobra meetings he didn't turn up to. The fact that he was, contrary to advice, as I recall, shaking hands with people known to have the illness, and shake lots of people at the same time's hands. It's, I mean, it shows a level of disregard for that. But he can only be guided by the information he has at the time, and that will only come out in an inquiry. The current posturing by this government would appear to suggest that an inquiry is coming, and they're mindful of it. The lack of apology. I don't expect him to come out and accept responsibility for 60,000 deaths, but he can come out and say, well, we did this, we sent people into care homes and it was incorrect, we shouldn't have done that. I mean, it just seems that everyone knows that's correct. Why he can't admit it, I can only assume it's for legal reasons, or that they anticipate an inquiry is coming. And if an inquiry is coming and they know they're going to be at fault, that really is the only explanation for some of the behaviour that seems to be exhibited on a daily basis. So the decision to put people with known symptoms into that environment really is utterly appalling. It really is utterly appalling. You imagine that they are the most vulnerable people in society as it is, and that is the generation, or the people in that group are among all the generation that's left that dealt with or had to put up with World War II and the period in the 50s where this country recovered from World War II. And the way we thank them is to not only treat a pandemic of which they are the most vulnerable, most prone to not only contracting it, but to having the most significant symptoms and risk of death, but to actively tip the problem into areas where they're residing. It is just an absolute disgrace. We look back at this period and we will be utterly ashamed. The government are there to represent us. Parliament is there to represent us. It will be something that I say we because the government is there representing the country. Parliament is there representing the country. We've elected them. Now, I personally didn't vote for Boris, but I voted in that election. We as an electorate are culpable for the people we put in charge of this country. And when we voted for Boris and for his parliament, we knew what we were getting. People that voted for him were clear, because he seems to have this sort of Teflon, this Teflon surface where nothing sticks to him. Nothing. I mean, I'm sure you have it from other people. The catalogue of dishonesty and reprehensible conduct that what my day job is. If he were accused of this in any regulatory proceeding, he would be struck off. If I had one of my I can't and won't say what profession I'm currently regulating, but if I had one of my members accused and dismissed for dishonesty in a public newspaper, they would be struck off or removed from membership. And yet what this country did was vote him in. That's just for one instance, let alone everything else that you can attribute to it. And you know, I think he's on the record as accepting that he's been examined in public, certainly, about his dismissal from, was it the Telegraph? His sacking by Michael Howard. These are accepted elements of dishonesty that he would be dismissed for in any regulatory proceedings, and yet we've put him into a job that he doesn't seem to be capable of doing. So, as an electorate, as a nation, we're as culpable as this Tory government. We really are, and we will be utterly ashamed when we come back. The concept of herd immunity and the idea of tipping these known infections into the care home community is something that we, the electorate, the Parliament and the government will be utterly ashamed of and won't be able to justify. Haircuts, Jay, were an absolute well, I'm just going to tone my language down. They were a nightmare. The state of my hair, Jay, was just. I've basically shaved most of it off now because it was intolerable. But if you imagine Chrissy Waddle back in the 80s, balding, curly, it was just awful. So in the end, I've had to shave it off, and it doesn't look too bad, Jay. Sorry, Jay. It was. If I assume that this enterprise doesn't have any pictures, and I could send you the most horrific picture of my hair that my brother took because he revelled. He absolutely revelled in how horrific my hair went, and you would probably disown me as a friend, Jay. But other than that, do you know the moments? I suppose in terms of nice moments, I mean, coming together. I started a new job back in February, and you know we've had to come together. It's been an unusual set of circumstances, but I think it's probably been good for camaraderie in that regard. We've all become more familiar with Zoom, you and I, we haven't kept in touch for years properly, but I think we've kept in touch more in the last 3 months with others that have, you know, we haven't. So that's been nice, encouraging that, and obviously mocking our singers is always good fun. I mean that's good fun whether it's COVID or not. But yeah, there's been no sort of screaming hilarity. It's just been getting on with it. I suppose that's one of the problems with it, is it's stuck indoors looking at 4 walls, and the limit of what you can get out and do is get out and do some shopping, go for a walk around the block with the kids. I suppose it's sort of leveled things out. Thankfully, we haven't had when I talk about leveling things out emotionally, we haven't had the lows of anybody close to us really suffering with it. But I suppose we've been robbed of the highs as well. I mean, the cricket season's just starting up. You know how much I love that. So we got the kids out training yesterday, which was nice to see them doing some exercise. But it's just been boring, Jay, really, isn't it? That's what it is. It's been emotionally very stable, other than unless you've been sort of personally affected by it. You see the misery on the TV, but thankfully it's not. And perhaps that's the benefit of living in suburban London, is sort of out of the way of it, really. Is that it?
Okay. You're going to ask me the questions. Well, basically, it was the news was out that there was a coronavirus going around, and we all had to be careful. You see, I was still at work, and as you know, as a health inspector, I was like almost like frontline, and we were awaiting information from the Public Health England, who coordinate measures to control this. You see, but while I was dead, this was going back to March now, and I was actually at work. My normal duties. Remember, March it rained almost every day, and I was doing inspections for licensing gambling places. And because it was raining, a lot of people were stuck inside, and premises I was visiting were generally overcrowded with people. And every time I got in there was just lots of people. And I think the week I was there, it was Cheltenham week, you see, so there was extra punters in them, So I started feeling a bit like a runny nose, like what a flu would look like, you see, in slight being unwell, So I self-isolated because that was the advice. And I checked my temperature at home, and it was gone like touching 38 degrees, which is like already paraxial, you see, fever. So I stayed away from work. Actually, went to work on the 16th and 17th because I had a meeting with somebody already pre-arranged. So I couldn't cancel, you see. But I knew that I shouldn't be there because I was already like, I didn't have a sneeze, just like a runny nose and dry cough, So I came home, self-isolated myself. And then the first symptoms I had, which was not very well known then, in fact nobody knew, was a loss of sense of smell and taste. I just immediately lost the sense of taste. I couldn't tell the difference between tea and coffee and things like that. And with that, I lost my sense of appetite. I didn't feel like eating anything. So I rapidly lost weight. And because I was self-isolating, I told my friends not to call around or come around, anything like that. And because they knew I was not well, people were bringing food, you see, but I just couldn't eat. I didn't eat anything at all, and my fridge just filled up with uneaten food, you see, takeaways, etc., And then, yeah, you got a question? I said, did you have a question? You were trying to interject somewhere. No? Anyway, so I just give you a time frame. This was like the 23rd of March, and then we're going on to 24th, and people kept phoning me, and there were about 5 friends who were particularly concerned about my fading health, you see, so they kept phoning, which was helpful, but at the same time quite disruptive because the phones were just going non-stop. And I have a good friend in Mauritius, and he was particularly concerned, so he informed a few people around here, including social services and one of his friends who lives near me, you see. And finally, cut a long story short, around the 23rd, a friend, he phoned the ambulance and said, you better go and have a look at this man, he's not very well. So about 8 in the evening, ambulance crew turned up, and they were very good. There were 2 ladies, and they took my temperature, and they said, you okay at the moment? I said, yes, I'm all right. I don't want to go to hospital. And then the next 3 days, I just went downhill. I became quite disorientated. I didn't open the curtains. I didn't know what time of the day it was. And I think that's where, you see, my friends again got concerned. And by Thursday, I think it's the 26th of March, they phoned in, 2 of them phoned the 111 emergency line, and the ambulance men turned up about 5 in the afternoon. And these 2 ambulance men were very good. They took my temperature, which was about 39.6. And they said, no, you're not staying here, you're coming with us, we're taking you to hospital, you see. So they virtually gave me about 5 minutes to get some things together. And they ran to the ambulance and brought a oxygen cylinder, and they said, "Come on," and they packed me off, and I ended up in hospital. And this was the 26th of March, and I was soon. I mean, it was a very busy unit, and people were. I was there in one moment, and they were taking blood, put up an IV, took an X-ray, checked me for, they took nasal swabs and mouth swabs, and I was quickly admitted to the not intensive care, but the isolation unit. And I rapidly went down, when I was there. I mean, I was really bad temperature, IV going, but my mouth was completely dry, really bone dry, and coughing, but I wasn't coughing anything up. And I think once I was in hospital, while I was receiving treatment, I wasn't getting much in the way of nursing, you see. And I also had diarrheal symptoms, and like I say, I hadn't eaten, so I'd lost a lot of weight as well, so I was very weak, you see. And that was the Thursday night, Friday, Saturday, and the Sunday night, Monday morning. I had to go to the toilet because, like I said, I had diarrhea, so I was up and going to the toilet every 2 hours almost. And 2 o'clock in the morning, there weren't many people around, and I was in the toilet, but suddenly I couldn't breathe. I just couldn't breathe, and I had a drip in one hand, and I thought, finished. I'm going to just drop dead now. Looking back, it's not funny, but I thought that was it, So I don't know. I almost gave up, but something told me, just open the door and get out, which I did. And fortunately, my bed was the closest to the toilet, so I just managed to get back in time to put the oxygen on again. And I survived, you see. But that was a turning point, because I could have quite easily just been dead in the bath, in the toilet, and nobody would have found me behind a closed door, you see. But that's how bad it is, that's how close I came to going, not surviving this damn thing. But after that incident, I told myself, damn it, I'm going to get better, I don't care what happens. And I started drinking, forced myself to eat. And the next day I coughed. This was Tuesday, on the 1st of April. I had a real bout of coughing, and I think I coughed half my lungs out there, but all the guns that came out, it was just unbelievable. There was so much, my lungs were so sort of clogged up with this mucus and dried mucus and all that. It was impairing my breathing, plus it was actually impairing the oxygen saturation, The normal is like 94% and above oxygen, but mine was like a good 10% lower. And the danger from that is that oxygen is, required for all the organs in the body. All the vital organs depend on oxygen. So when the oxygen levels drop, your brain, there's a threat of strokes from that. Your heart, you're under threat of heart attack. Your kidneys, liver, they all can fail because of low oxygen, you see. And this coronavirus does exactly that. It lowers your oxygen intake into the body, into the lungs, you see. So after the Tuesday incident, I said, I better get better, otherwise I'm going to just not get out of this place alive, you see. So I forced myself to do exercise, breathing, deep breathing, drink more, forced to eat all the hospital food, and slowly built up my strength. And I think that's how I survived, you see. I just didn't want to die, I suppose. For the breathing. The breathing is the thing that people first notice. I mean, not that, in my case, like I said, I lost a sense of smell and taste. But the breathing is the killer, you see. If you cannot breathe, then you just become breathless, which is what happens. And that's a very frightening experience. And I think if you look at some of the cases in China, the early stages in December 2019, people are dropping dead on the street in Wuhan, you see, and that's exactly what happened. They just couldn't breathe and just dropped dead, And coronavirus, it's there, it's unseen, it's metaphysical almost, but damping can do heck of a lot of damage to people. I never thought I would get it. I was so confident being a health inspector that I would be, averse to getting this, but it got me, the first time I've been in hospital, first time I've ever traveled in an ambulance, and it's a very frightening thing. And I thought to myself when I was discharged, I said, I looked around at all the things in my house and I said, what is life, when you can't have it? And this thing nearly took my life. I'm okay, but in the sense that, I still am breathless, and the hospital, they're trying to do some sort of in-depth study with patients who've recovered from coronavirus or survived coronavirus, and they sent physiotherapists to do some assessment at home, and she was pretty good. She sort of put me through some exercises, and the most noticeable, significant thing is that you get breathless. If you do anything strenuous, I was trying to just move a ladder upstairs and I just became so breathless. And that's the thing. Number two is that you lose a lot of energy. I just don't have the same energy like I had before. And I haven't regained all the weight I lost. I lost 9.7 kilograms, and my normal weight's about 75 kilograms. So I lost nearly 10 kilograms in that short period and haven't fully regained my full weight again, even now. I'm 72 kilos, so I'm about 3.5 kilos short. The other thing is that this is very strange. It never happened before, but my hair has completely gone different. It's never come up as part of the symptoms, but perhaps something new, you see. And my hair is very sort of soft and fine hair, and suddenly it's become very spiky and very, very greasy. And I don't know if there's any connection between this and coronavirus, but as I said, like when I had the early symptom of loss of taste, it wasn't a recognized symptom, It's only about 2 months later that it was officially put out that one of the first symptoms of coronavirus is loss of sense of taste and smell, you see. And yet I had it way back in March, So it's a new, almost like people are learning, I think, about this damn thing. And I don't know what more, is going to come out of it, because at the moment it's still doing its horrible things around, And the biggest worry is that there's a good chance that there might be a second wave, like what happened with the Spanish flu. And there's no vaccine at the moment. People are taking all sorts of other things, and but in some countries the cases, it just keeps rising, you see. So there's every risk that it might just never go away. Hmm. Mm-hmm. Hmm. Hmm. Well, this is a very personal experience, and I don't know whether it will apply to everyone, but going back to that night, it was 2 o'clock in the morning, and as I said, I was in the toilet and I locked the door, and no one knew I was there. There were no nurses or anything like that. And I just got away from the toilet where the call button was, emergency, like a pull cord, you see. And I was nearly like between the door and the toilet when I suddenly found I just couldn't breathe. I was in a standing position. I had my drip stand on my left hand, and I just couldn't breathe. That means the next moment I would have collapsed on the floor, and bingo, that would have been the end, you see. But I said to myself, I actually said to myself, is this it? That my life is ending now, you see, this moment. And at that moment, I thought about my children, and some things flashed in front of me. I suppose people say this, before they die, things flash in front of them. And that sort of thing happened to me. It really did. And then something said to me, don't panic, just open the door and get out. And that's exactly what I did. I don't know where I found the strength, but I reached with my right hand, because my left hand had the drip, and opened the door. And it's a sliding door, you see, not a sliding door, but it's sort of, it opened anyway, quite a large door. And I got out, and like I said, my bed was number 1 bed, and it's the closest to the toilet, so I just found the strength, even though I was like gasping for breath, and just made it and got the oxygen. And once the oxygen was on, I could actually breathe. And that was the difference between life and survival and death, you see. And once I'd gone through that, I suppose you can call it like a near-death experience. And it's never happened before, but when that happened to me, I just said, damn this, I realized, that I'd come so close to not seeing another day, you see. Basically, that would have been it, you see. And then I eventually said to myself, I got to survive. I got to fight this. And I sort of, my mouth was like dry, absolutely. I mean, my tongue and everything was like. So I started drinking, forced myself to drink. And those of you who know what hospital food is like, you see, I had no taste, nothing. I had no appetite, but I forced myself to eat. Just to get the system going and get my strength back, you see. And I said, I got to fight this, otherwise it will just take me, you see. And I sort of started moving around, and exercising my leg, walking around the bed, sitting outside, deep breathing, and rehydrated myself. And then by Tuesday, like I said, I had this massive coughing episode. I went back to the toilet and I coughed, like I said, half my lungs out, and the guns that came out, there was so much infection sitting in the lungs. And then, very soon, the oxygen saturation level just went up. So the lungs, basically were so badly affected, clogged out, with this mucus buildup, because what they said is that it sort of completely drowns your lungs, the coronavirus. So by coughing out and clearing my lungs, suddenly I could breathe, and the oxygen saturation level moved up, you see. And after that, I started basically on the road to recovery. And the doctors came and said, would you like to go home? I said, yes, please, because I just wanted to get out of hospital and come back to my familiar surroundings and get better. So yeah, it's not something I'll recommend for anybody. But I'm telling everyone now, just be careful of this, because you could just as well get this, you see. I just don't agree with a lot of the government policies, on control measures and all that, the lockdown and all that. And I think one has to look very carefully, because at the beginning they didn't come out with very clear, defined information. You see, the self-isolation, all this was very much. Even now, the whole question about, whether you should or shouldn't wear masks, or whether you should or shouldn't wear gloves and all that, you see, because I think they don't know enough about the coronavirus, because they said, well, they say, is it aerosol? Is it just droplet? Well, if it affects the lung, then it can aerosol. That means it can just float around in the air. Okay. Now they should come out very clear about wearing of mask. Where people can obtain masks, and how long should they be wearing a mask? Like, you can't wear the same mask over and over again. You got to dispose and put a fresh one, you see, that sort of thing. So I think that element of guidance is very unclear. And a lot of people out there got a very cavalier attitude. You know what happened at Bournemouth Beach when the sun came out? And everybody went for the sun and forgot coronavirus, you see. I think that's the sort of thing I want to say, that if you really are serious about controlling this virus, then it's the people, you see, out there. I see people out of the window here, and I see they had meetings. There was a wedding that took place about 3-4 weeks ago. I think there's a limit on, at that time, 10 people, but I counted about 38 people in that wedding. And so, you see, there is a lot of cavalier attitude about actual safety, you see. They're not very clear, and they're not enforcing it in a forceful way, you see. Another charity organization, they delivered food on every Thursday, fantastic meals, they just dropped it in and never asked a penny for it, And friends who did shopping for me, I was, at one time, people were just bringing so much food, shopping and things. I had about 60 apples, and things like 2 or 3 liters of, the pints of milk, and so much, people just turned up to look after me, which is fantastic, you see.